When Syria falls, the world burns, according to Baba Vega's chilling prophecy. Everyone, Johnny here, Don't Speak News. Well, we've been talking a lot about Bible prophecy, but here's some more kind of a Nostradamus type prophecy from someone named Baba Vanga, and she was considered the Nostradamus of the Balkans and had warned that Syria's fall would mark the start of a devastating global war. Her prophecy states that when Syria falls, a great war between the West and East will follow. In the spring, meaning I'm assuming this upcoming spring, a conflict will ignite in the East, leading to a third world war, a war that will destroy the West. Vanga passed away in 1996, but gained fame for her prophecies, including the 9/11 attacks and the Kursk submarine disaster. Her warning about Syria has drawn renewed attention. She said Syria will fall at the feet of the winner, but the winner will not be the one. And so there you go. When Syria falls, the world burns. That is the prophecy from someone named Baba. Now, as far as the so-called Syrian rebels inside of Syria that helped create this fall of Assad in Syria, they're saying that Jerusalem is next. I got this video here yesterday late from Leland Jones, and he said, look, the Syrian rebels are now saying that they're going to go up against Israel and march to Jerusalem. And so here we go. It looks like Israel is going to be getting some blowback from the so-called rebels they supported in Syria. This is a big reason why Israel is destroying as much Syrian weaponry as they can, so they don't have to fight against it later. And like I said, Armageddon continues to unfold. The return of Jesus Christ is at hand. And so in this video statement, they said Damascus is now done, Jerusalem is next, and then Gaza. And they also told in this statement, they told the Palestinians to remain patient, that they were on the way eventually. Well, we'll see, because so far, Israel's rolled on into Syria all the way up to within 3 kilometers of Damascus, and nobody's done a darn thing to stop them. And I don't believe that they will either. One statement, the terrorists said they don't have the equipment or the manpower to stop Israel in their incursions. This is from Hal Turner's website here last night, 8:27 Eastern last night. Israel was sending multiple columns of main battle tanks into Syria. And the map below shows, in a general sense, from where these tanks columns are entering, right here from the Golan Heights area. And they're all rolling all the way, like I said, up to 3 kilometers of Damascus. Numerous reports are coming in as that the Israeli entity into Syria is in fact an invasion. Multiple reports are flowing in, stating verbatim that villages and towns of Arna, Basquiam, Rama, Haina, I'm not going to try and pronounce all these guys, but they were all taken over by Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force commenced waves of bombings in Damascus and elsewhere in Syria. Yeah, hundreds of sorties, guys, and along with the United States doing the same thing. We talked about it the other day. As the second wave of bombing took place, numerous reports began coming in and indicating a chemical smell is now wafting through parts of Damascus, causing people to choke and go into convulsions on the streets. Now, very well could have been chemical weapons, guys. Could have been sarin gas, something of that nature, that would cause that convulsions in the streets and people choking. It basically shuts your nervous system down and you die. And so that could have been what it was. I'm not certain. This is the only source that I've seen report on this particular issue. But it very well could have been the Israelis bombing a chemical weapons factory of some kind or storage of some kind near Damascus, and that's what was released. It's hard to say. I don't think Israel would release chemical weapons intentionally upon the population of Damascus, but you never know. You just never know with Israel. Earlier tonight, as of 6:39 Eastern, Israeli tanks were within 38 kilometers of Damascus. We know now that they're a lot closer. IDF strikes were targeting the Scientific Studies and Research Center in Damascus. And then I'm going to kind of skip down here, guys. Here's the statement issued by the Saudis, Saudi Arabia, saying that that everyone needs to respect Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and that the Golan is occupied Syrian Arab land. Well, since they're not going to do anything about it, I guess their statement means nothing as usual. They truly have shown themselves to be cowardly people, the Saudis, or their government certainly is. They allowed the genocide in Gaza, and they allowed the Israeli attacks against Iran. They did nothing about either one. The Saudis seem to me to have become Israeli-owned pets. They always were. They were never anything different. Intel reports said that Israeli tanks are less than 3 kilometers from the city of Katana in southern Damascus, Syria countryside. And we'll just skip down to the covert intel here. He says here that Assad rejected a deal with the U.S. before his overthrow. I heard about a deal being offered to Assad, but I wasn't positive on it because, there was no real sources. It was just reports on Telegram. But according to Hal, this is what happened. Before the Western-backed opposition advanced in Syria, the Americans offered him if he stopped allowing Iran to use his territory for Hezbollah. In return for that, the U.S. promised a gradual lifting of sanctions against Syria. Now, that was the part I'd read about, that the U.S. was considering a gradual lifting of the sanctions against Syria, but I couldn't confirm it anywhere. Well, apparently it was true. But more fatal for Assad was his refusal to improve relations with Erdogan and Turkey, who proposed normalizing ties with Damascus in exchange for restraining Kurdish groups and allowing the return of at least some Syrian refugees to the Republic. When those two offers were rejected, both the U.S. and Israel and Turkey unleashed the HTS terrorists. That's what happened. Then at 11:04 last night, a large Turkish military column now entered northeastern Syria. Yes, they're going there to take on the Kurds. And at 11:11 p.m. last night, all communications that Hal had access to went dead in Syria. And then this morning, on the 10th of December, Israeli aggression in Syria overnight with strikes reaching northern Syria. Israeli tanks are reported to have occupied all these different little villages and towns in the South Damascus countryside, and the tanks are now 3 kilometers from Damascus. That was as of early this morning. So I'm sure things may have changed since then. We'll have to keep our eyes open as always. Now, in this report, I find this report very, very interesting. Is a new Russian-Turkey alliance forming? A lot of people say Russia and Turkey are Gog and Magog. Syrian President Assad moves to Moscow. Of course, we know the final portion of the Gog-Magog battle is fought after the millennial reign in Revelation 20, but we still have parts of it to deal with right now. So let's get into this like we always do. And so Brian does a great job over here at Health Impact News, by the way. If you don't know about it and not subscribed, I suggest that you get subscribed. Anyway, he says here, it's been a few days since I provided an update to the current conflicts in these beginning stages of World War III, and much has happened within a very short period of time, and will continue to happen, in my humble opinion. Let me outline the chronology of events first, before providing commentary. And so I'm going to skip through some of this, guys, because we've already been through it, such as the November 11th, 2024 Russian missile attack on Ukraine, which showcased their new missile, the Oreshnik. And like it says here, there are currently no missile defense systems that can intercept these new missiles, which is why the $20 billion to Ukraine for Patriot missile systems makes absolutely zero sense, because they stand zero chance of intercepting any of these things. And so it's just another $20 billion that they're laundering, that the criminals of the world are laundering through Ukraine. American taxpayer money that will never get paid back, by the way. Because it's all borrowed money. And it's all BS. It drives me nuts. And they know it does. It drives everyone nuts and, everyone in America crazy when they see all their money just flying out to other countries, but they can't get any help for places like North Carolina. Just saying. We'll get to that in a minute. Back to this story. 4 days later, on November 25th, 2024, Russia issued a public statement that was quoted in the Turkish media calling for an end to Israeli airstrikes on civilians in Lebanon. That same day, guys, it was announced suddenly in the U.S. corporate media that a ceasefire agreement had been reached between Israel and Lebanon. The very next day, on November 26, 2024, Turkey publicly complained about new sanctions on Russia that the Biden administration had just implemented that would affect Turkey's ability to pay for natural gas from Russia to get through the winter. And so they sought exemptions on those sanctions. The day after that was published, on November 27th, 2024, anti-Syrian rebel forces started a lightning-fast military campaign and soon took over Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. These forces then rapidly marched on Damascus, Syria's largest city, this weekend, with the result that Syrian President Assad has now fled to Moscow, allegedly bringing with him much of Syria's national assets to ensure a comfortable lifestyle for his new home in Russia. Well, of course he would. So who exactly is going to run Syria's government at this point is not clear. Well, it's the terrorists. And it depends on which group fighting for power actually gets the power. But a lot of people expect it to just divide into sections. You'll have an American section where they already are in those oil fields, and then you'll have Damascus being run by the terrorists, and then Turkey running the north, pretty much, is how that's going to go. So there is a new alliance forming between Turkey and Russia. So the perspective of what just happened these past several days differ widely depending on which English news you are reading, as U.S., Russian, Arab, Iranian, and Turkish English news channels all have a different slant on what just happened in Syria. Sputnik News, an English news medium out of Russia, has published what I think is a good summary of each country's interest in Syria. And I'll let you read the rest on your own in that particular section, because this report is lengthy, but very good. So in my opinion, Russia is probably the one who brokered this deal, especially considering the chain of events that started after they unveiled their Oreshnik missile. Consider also that Russia, while allowing the government in Syria to end bringing Assad to Moscow, maintained their very key military bases in the region, as the Syrian opposition is apparently guaranteed security of Russian military bases, according to the Kremlin. Russian officials are in touch with representatives of the armed Syrian opposition. But here's the thing, guys. Some of these groups, especially the mercenaries they brought in from Central Asia, places like Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, they're against the Russian presence inside of Syria and they want them out. So not everyone is in agreement on the security of Russian military bases. However, while Russia may have been the driving force to allow all this to happen, many sources believe it was Turkey who carried out the plans. And at this point, based on everything I've read so far, I tend to agree. The Turkish-Kurdish problem is a problem that has existed for decades now, and Turkey blames the Kurdish resistance forces as terrorists and a threat to their borders. And the author lived and worked in Turkey for several years in the 80s, and he was hired by a private NGO firm in 1990 to go to southeastern Turkey after the Gulf War to help with repatriating the Kurds into northern Iraq who had fled Saddam Hussein's attacks on their cities. He was hired as a translator at the time. This could mean that with Russia's new prominence in weapons technology, with the launching of their Oreshnik missile, that they are forming a stronger alliance with Turkey, with whom they have continued to supply energy resources with, even during the Ukraine war with sanctions in place, and that includes nuclear power. There's a report that was published here, how Russia helps NATO member Turkey reach nuclear status. Also yesterday, December 8th, 2024, Turkish President Erdogan reportedly said something I never heard him say before in a speech, and as far as I could tell, this was first reported by the official Russian media outlet TASS. He stated that there are only two world leaders left in the world, himself and Putin, as Erdogan has been in office for 22 years, about the same amount of time Putin has been in office. And here's his statement right here. Most Americans are probably unaware that Turkey is the remnant of the great Ottoman Empire, which at its height, guys, was larger than the Roman Empire. Imagine that. Besides Turkey, there are 5 independent nations whose citizens are Turks and speak a Turkish dialect. And all of them are in Central Asia, right here, and were one time part of the Soviet Union. There are also significant populations of Turks in other countries as well, such as the 12 million Uyghurs who live in China. So if indeed there is a stronger alliance forming between Russia and Turkey, this is no trivial matter. No, it's not. And like I said, Erdogan, Turkey, slippery. They play both sides very, very well. Now, things seem to be developing very rapidly now. And it's hard to know what the immediate future holds since Russia has introduced this new missile that apparently cannot be defended at this point. And so Sam Parker behind the News Network recently wrote about the significance of the new weapon system by Russia and its implications in Ukraine and elsewhere. I'll let you read that on your own. We're going to skip down here. Basically, it's a struggle for power between the elites behind the scenes as well, is what this is discussing the most. But I think you get the point, guys. There's a very good possibility that Russia and Turkey have formed a new alliance, and that's very concerning for the rest of the world. And they let Assad fall. But I guess, like I said, over Hal's report here, Assad was offered a deal to stay in power, but he would have had to stop allowing Iran to use his territory for Hezbollah. In return, the U.S. promised a gradual lifting of the sanctions against Syria, which, like I said, I read about. And, the article sounded like it was something they were going seriously thinking about doing. But then it never happened because obviously he refused. Assad refused the deal. So that's where we stand as of right now inside of Syria. And as Syria fell, we still have all these executions going on, guys. I've put all kinds of stuff like that over on my Telegram account. I'm not going to show them here because I don't want to get censored any more than I already am here on YouTube and other places. But mass executions have begun. They're also asking people inside of Syria and Damascus in particular who they affiliated with. They want to know what your religion is. Are you part of what movement you're with? All these different questions that they're intimidating people on the streets with. So please keep the Christians in Damascus and in Syria in general in your prayers, because they are going to be persecuted heavily and killed, hunted down and killed once again. So please keep those folks in your prayers in Syria and around the world, because persecution and tribulation for Christians is happening, even though it hasn't in America quite yet. It's going to. Just give it some time. Now, U.S. hypocrisy has reached a new level as Israel's occupation of Syria is being called security, while Russia's moves in Ukraine are called aggression. And Netanyahu's reasoning for his latest land grab lays bare the stark hypocrisy of his Western supporters. And that's one of the things I get so sick of, the gaslighting, the hypocrisy, trying to convince us that what's happening in front of our eyes isn't really happening. It's something else. It's just so ridiculous and maddening. So this week, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that following the fall of Bashar al-Assad, the 1974 separation of forces agreement between his country and Damascus is no longer valid. So they're just going to go ahead and roll into Syria like they've been doing. This deal, brokered by the United Nations, prohibited military deployments in the buffer zone of the Golan Heights, a region legally recognized as Syrian territory, but occupied by the Jewish state since 1967. Well, now they've taken it all. There's no more buffer zone. Netanyahu's reasoning: since Syria's internationally recognized government no longer exists after Assad's departure, he no longer considers prior treaties with Damascus binding. According to this interpretation, Israel is justified in bombing Syrian airfields, seizing ports, and even expanding its territorial occupation, all under the guise of ensuring its national security and securing the Greater Israel Project that they've been pursuing all this time, which includes most of Syria except for the extreme north. So, in the meantime, the West is calling Russia's moves in Ukraine aggression, and they have been since the war began, even though they were the ones who started the whole thing by starting a coup inside of Ukraine back in 2014, but we've talked about that many times already. And then, hey, Joe, how about North Carolina? North Carolina Hurricane Helene update. This is from strangesounds.org. Well, this is actually a Substack, his blog website. It seems that no money has arrived yet, even though we're sending another $20 billion to Ukraine and $1 billion to Africa now after the meetings they had over there at the beginning of December. Representative Greg Murphy from North Carolina says help for struggling North Carolina communities months after the storms not only need to be a federal response, but also a state response. Not even the state has stepped in to help, guys, except to tell them they can't live in certain places because they're not up to code. I mean, unreal. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has given another, well, it's not 988 million, guys. It's 20 billion. Let me show you over here on my Telegram account. While there are max executions, that's not the one. I had a news statement here somewhere. There we go. The U.S. Treasury Department has announced a $20 billion loan to Ukraine, backed by frozen Russian assets to be dispersed through a World Bank intermediary fund for economic and financial aid. Well, that's from the Russian sovereign funds that they stole. So I guess it's not taxpayer money at that time. But the 988 million will be. And the $1 billion in for humanitarian support for Africa, as he bragged about the U.S. being the world's largest provider of humanitarian aid and development. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance is touring the damage from Hurricane Helene. Of course, he can't do anything about it yet because he and Trump are not in office yet. So, hey, Joe, how about North Carolina? I'd be furious if I were you, indeed. Even more disturbing is contractors was told to stop building new houses as of December 11th as North Carolina hurricane recovery faces budget woes. But we got plenty of money to send overseas all the time, don't we? Where and how are all the new homeless going to go through the winter season? Oh yeah, sorry, they want them to die. They want us all to die. And so lots of videos here, guys, that you can watch. And even if you're covered, insurance companies are finding ways to wiggle out of it. Look at this. This man actually had hurricane insurance and was told by State Farm they will not pay because he was flooded and the flood was not due to the hurricane. So they're weaseling their way out of it. And you can see all kinds of massive amounts of damage here at the North Fork Reservoir for one. And meanwhile, a new storm system is moving into the area as well. Wow. I pray that these guys get the money and the aid that they need. I pray for them every single day. They're on my list. Wow. Don't forget these guys. Don't forget them in North Carolina, Tennessee, all those affected areas, Georgia, Florida. They are still struggling, dealing with homelessness. Imagine losing everything. You don't even have your flipping car because it went down the river along with your house. I mean, I can't even imagine that. And one person has taken in a family and into his place and they're doing their best to make these things work. But no aid has come in. No money has been made available for these folks yet. Even though they've talked about it in the press, they haven't done it yet. Remember, always look at what they do. Look at their actions. Don't listen to their words because usually they're lying. So, like it says here, while Sleepy Joe quietly disappears from the world stage, China has made its largest show of force in 30 years. Everybody is. China made its largest show of force around Taiwan in decades, in a time when President Joe Biden is seemingly less involved as commander-in-chief, moving over for President-elect Donald Trump. So what happened? Well, the Chinese Navy deployed a group of 60 ships and 30 Coast Guard vessels off the coast of Taiwan this week, in what appears to be their largest show of force since 1996, according to the Wall Street Journal. The move comes as Biden has increasingly winded down his duties in anticipation of handing off his responsibilities to Trump. And then, of course, they say he fell asleep during a meeting with African leaders in Angola on December 4th. Of course he did. Now, the meeting was intended to discuss funding of humanitarian projects in the nation, with an estimated price tag of $1 billion. The initiatives in the country are intended in part to counter China's influence in Africa, according to the White House briefing December 1st. And so, there we go again. China going to make their move on Taiwan too, guys. Just wait. It's coming. Probably at the same time everything else starts to happen. And in case you haven't noticed, earthquakes have increased in volume and intensity. There was another one out by Reno, Nevada earlier today at 5.8. Shook up Northern California as well. Volcanoes are in Alaska by Anchorage are getting ready to go off. I mean, it's all going to come down at once. And so my question to you is this. How are you going to weather the storm? Who is your ark? Who are you going to run to when all this trouble really kicks off? And we're just seeing the beginnings of it now. It's really going to take off. And it's all going to happen, boom, 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 boom. Rapid succession. Rapid fire, man. If you don't have him right now, you need Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior to weather this storm. He is the ark that will bring you through this flood. Except this time it's going to be fire, not water. And so you need to seek him today. Do not delay another day. Don't say you're going to do it tomorrow because you might not have tomorrow. Your time on this earth could be done in an instant, right now, today, tonight. We are not guaranteed any amount of time on this earth. So make the right decision for your eternal life right now by making Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior today. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one gets to the Father but through him. So please make that vital and crucial decision right now while there's still time, because it's the best prep that you can make. That's why we always say pray it up first, prepped up second. All right, don't forget, don'tspeaknews.com, home base for all that we do. Over 2,000 stories, I think over 2,500 now. Here on the website, don'tspeaknews.com. And put all kinds of stories that we can't speak about anywhere else, including this one about the outgoing HHS secretary and the act that he's extending, and all kinds of other stories that are just like it that we can't talk about anywhere else right here at don'tspeaknews.com. And that is it for now. God bless, take care. Johnny Storm, Don't Speak News.